The 1960s and 1970s gave us songs so deeply tied to a specific moment in time that hearing them today instantly tells you something about how old you really are, whether you like it or not. Some of these barely get airplay anymore, yet they were once absolutely everywhere. If you remember these 15 songs, you might be old, respectfully. Number 15, Precious and Few by Climax. Released in 1972, this song was written by Walter D. Nims, who also served as the lead vocalist for the group Climax, formed in Los Angeles in the early 1970s. It reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 that spring, becoming the band's only major national hit despite several follow-up singles released over the next few years. The song's soft, orchestrated arrangement, built around gentle strings and a smooth vocal delivery, fit comfortably alongside the easy listening and soft rock hits dominating adult-oriented radio at the time. Nims had actually built a career as a session musician and songwriter for several years before Climax's formation, giving the group a level of studio polish that helped the single stand out on crowded early 1970s playlists. Despite its massive success, the band never returned to the top 40, and Climax largely faded from public awareness by the middle of the decade. The song remains one of the clearest examples of a genuinely massive hit from the era that has almost entirely disappeared from modern radio rotation, remembered today mostly by listeners who were tuning in at the exact moment it topped the charts. The song's success was significant enough that it earned a gold record for selling over 1 million copies, a considerable achievement for a band that would never again come close to matching that level of commercial recognition on the national charts. Number 14, Which Way You Goin' Billy by The Poppy Family. Released in late 1969 and reaching its chart peak in early 1970, this song was written by Terry Jacks and performed by The Poppy Family, a Canadian group led by Terry Jacks and his wife, singer Susan Jacks. It reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming one of the biggest hits by a Canadian act on the American charts up to that point. The song's gentle, melancholic melody and Susan Jacks's distinctive vocal delivery set it apart from more upbeat pop singles competing for airtime at the time. Terry Jacks would go on to even bigger solo success a few years later with Seasons in the Sun, but this earlier hit remained the song that first introduced the couple to a mainstream American audience. The Poppy Family disbanded not long after the single's success, with Terry and Susan Jacks later divorcing, bringing an end to one of the more successful Canadian musical partnerships of that era. Despite its massive chart performance at the time, the song has largely faded from regular rotation, remembered today mainly by listeners who caught it during its brief but genuine moment at the top of the charts. The song's success also helped establish a small but influential wave of Canadian acts breaking into the American market during the early 1970s, paving the way for other Canadian artists who found similar crossover success in the years that followed. Number 13, Build Me Up Buttercup by The Foundations. Released in 1968, this song was written by Tony McCauley and Mike Dabo, the latter also known as the lead singer of Manfred Mann, and performed by The Foundations, a racially integrated British soul group that had already scored an earlier hit with Baby, Now That I've Found You. It reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States, becoming one of the most successful British soul recordings to cross over to American radio during that period. The song's upbeat, horn-driven arrangement and catchy repeated chorus made it an instant favorite on both sides of the Atlantic, helped along by the band's tight, danceable rhythm section. The Foundations were notable at the time for being one of the first multiracial pop groups to achieve major chart success in Britain, a detail that added extra significance to their commercial breakthrough. Despite 2 major transatlantic hits, the group struggled to sustain that level of success afterward and disbanded within a few years. The song experienced a notable resurgence decades later after being featured prominently in a popular 1990s film, introducing it to an entirely new generation of listeners who had no memory of its original 1968 chart run. Macaulay and Diabo reportedly wrote the song specifically with the Foundation's existing style in mind, aiming to capture the same upbeat, danceable energy that had made their earlier single a hit, a formula that clearly worked given the song's strong transatlantic chart performance. Number 12, Time of the Season by the Zombies. Recorded in 1967 but not released as a single until 1968, this song was written by keyboardist Rod Argent and became the band's biggest American hit, reaching number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the spring of 1969. The song's success was especially unusual because the Zombies had already broken up by the time it became a hit, meaning none of the band members were available to tour or capitalize on the sudden wave of popularity sweeping across American radio. Its distinctive breathy vocal delivery, prominent bass line, and jazz-influenced organ solo gave the song a sound that stood apart from most other British invasion-era rock singles of the period. The album it came from, Odessey and Oracle, had actually been recorded on a shoestring budget using leftover studio time from the Beatles sessions at Abbey Road Studios. Because the band no longer existed by the time the song became a hit, several imposter groups reportedly toured under the Zombies name in the United States, falsely claiming to be the original band behind the song. Decades later, the song remains a favorite of psychedelic and progressive rock enthusiasts, even as casual radio listeners have largely lost track of it. Argent has said in later interviews that the song was written quickly, almost as an afterthought during the final sessions for the album, making its eventual status as the band's most enduring and commercially successful recording feel especially unexpected given how little attention it initially received. Number 11. Cherish by The Association. Released in the summer of 1966, this song was written by band member Terry Kirkman and became The Association's first major hit, reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that September. Kirkman has said in interviews that he wrote the song's lyrics quickly, almost as an afterthought after already completing the melody, drawing on genuine personal feelings about unspoken affection and longing. The recording's lush vocal harmonies, a hallmark of much of the group's catalog, helped establish The Association as one of the leading vocal harmony groups of the mid-1960s sunshine pop movement. The song's massive success came as something of a surprise to the band, who had struggled to gain traction with earlier singles before this one finally broke through to a national audience. The Association would go on to have several more hits over the following years, but this remained their first and, commercially, one of their most significant recordings. Despite topping the charts for weeks during its original run, the song is now largely absent from mainstream oldies radio playlists, remembered clearly only by listeners who were tuned in during its original chart-topping summer. Kirkman went on to remain closely involved with the Association throughout the rest of their career, and this song is often credited as the recording that first established the group's reputation for lush, tightly arranged vocal harmonies, a signature sound they would continue refining on subsequent hits. Number 10, Fallin' in Love by Hamilton, Joe Frank and Reynolds. Released in 1975, this song was written by Dan Hamilton and Ann Marshall Hamilton, and performed by the trio Hamilton, Joe Frank and Reynolds, formerly known as Hamilton, Joe Frank and Dennison before a lineup change. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that August, becoming the group's only chart-topping hit despite having previously scored a top 5 single a few years earlier under their original name. The song's smooth, easy listening arrangement fit comfortably within the soft rock sound, dominating much of mid-1970s American radio, built around warm vocal harmonies and a gentle mid-tempo rhythm. Dan Hamilton had been a member of an earlier group called the Ides of March before helping form this trio, giving him a fairly established background in the music industry before this song's unexpected success. Despite reaching number 1, the group never managed another major hit afterward, and they largely faded from national prominence within just a couple of years. The song remains a clear example of a chart-topping single from the era that has since almost entirely disappeared from regular oldies radio rotation. The trio's earlier hit under their original name, Don't Pull Your Love, had reached number 4 in 1971, meaning the group had already experienced significant chart success once before this unexpected return to the top of the charts several years later. Number 9. Undercover Angel by Alan O'Day. Released in 1977, this song was written and performed by Alan O'Day, a songwriter who had already achieved considerable success writing hits for other artists, including Helen Reddy's #1 single Angie Baby a few years earlier. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that August, becoming O'Day's only major hit as a performer, despite his much longer and more successful career working behind the scenes as a songwriter. The song's playful, falsetto-heavy vocal delivery and lighthearted lyrics about a dream encounter gave it a distinctly breezy, radio-friendly appeal that helped it stand out during a summer dominated by disco and album-oriented rock. O'Day has said in interviews that he wrote the song's melody first, developing the story around a genuinely unusual dream he had experienced, before shaping it into a complete pop song. Despite topping the charts, O'Day never managed another hit as a performer, though he continued writing successful songs for other artists throughout the rest of the decade. The song remains a fondly remembered but rarely played piece of mid-1970s pop radio history. O'Day recorded nearly every vocal part on the track himself, layering multiple takes of his own falsetto to create the song's distinctive close harmony backing vocals, a detail that reflected the same meticulous studio craftsmanship he had already brought to his songwriting work for other artists. 8. Torn Between Two Lovers by Mary McGregor. Released in late 1976, this song was written by Peter Yarrow, formerly of the folk trio Peter, Paul, and Mary, along with Alabama songwriter Philip Jarrell, and performed by Mary McGregor, a Minnesota-born singer who had previously worked as a backing vocalist for Yarrow. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in February 1977, becoming McGregor's signature hit and one of the most successful songs about a genuine romantic love triangle to top the American charts. Yarrow originally intended the song to be sung by a male vocalist, but he ultimately allowed McGregor to record it for her debut album after hearing her perform during his solo touring dates. The song earned McGregor a Grammy nomination for Best Pop Vocal Performance Female, cementing its status as a genuine critical and commercial success at the time of its release. Despite that success, McGregor never achieved another hit of comparable size, and the song's massive popularity gradually faded from regular radio rotation over the following decades. It remains a clear snapshot of mid-1970s soft rock at its most emotionally direct, a genuine #1 hit that few casual listeners today would immediately recognize by title alone. McGregor had previously worked as a backing vocalist for other prominent artists before this breakthrough, giving her years of professional studio experience, even though this remained by far the biggest moment of her own recording career. Number 7. Shannon by Henry Gross. Released in February 1976, this song was written by Henry Gross, a founding member of the group Shannon before launching his solo career. After a genuinely coincidental conversation with Beach Boys member Carl Wilson during a shared tour the previous year, Gross mentioned that he owned a dog named Shannon, and Wilson responded that he had also owned a dog with the same name that had recently been killed after being struck by a car. The song reached #6 on the Billboard Hot 100 that summer and topped the charts in both Canada and New Zealand, becoming Gross's only major hit as a solo artist. Its gentle, melancholic tone and heartfelt lyrics about loss resonated deeply with listeners, many of whom were unaware the song was actually about the death of a pet rather than a person. The song later gained unexpected renewed attention decades after its release when a radio host's emotional, unfiltered reaction to a listener's dedication request involving the song became widely circulated. Despite its gold record status and lasting emotional impact, the song rarely receives airplay today. Remembered mostly by listeners who first heard it during its original 1976 chart run, Gross has said the song came together remarkably quickly once he sat down to write it, describing the entire process as taking only about 20 minutes from start to finish, a striking contrast to the song's lasting emotional resonance with listeners over the decades since. Number 6. Dancing in the Moonlight by King Harvest. Released in 1972, this song was written years earlier by musician Sherman Kelly, who composed it while recovering from a violent physical attack he and his girlfriend endured during a trip to the Caribbean island of St. Croix. Kelly has said he wrote the song specifically as a vision of an alternate, peaceful reality following that traumatic experience, giving the genuinely upbeat, carefree recording a far darker origin story than its lyrics would ever suggest. The song was first recorded by Kelly's earlier band, Boffalongo, before his brother Wells Kelly, serving as drummer for the Paris-based group King Harvest, introduced the song to that band, whose version became the hit most people remember today. It reached number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1973, becoming King Harvest's only significant chart entry, despite additional releases over the following years. Sherman Kelly eventually joined King Harvest on tour to perform the song live, even though he hadn't been part of the band's original hit recording. Decades later, the song remains a warm, nostalgic favorite among listeners who remember its original run, even though most modern radio stations rarely include it in regular rotation anymore. Dave "Doc" Robinson, who sang lead vocals on King Harvest's version, had actually also been a member of Kelly's earlier band Boffalongo, giving the two overlapping recordings of the song a genuine shared history rather than a coincidental connection between two unrelated groups. Number 5. Angie Baby by Helen Reddy.
Angie Baby, you're special.
Released in October 1974, this song was written by songwriter Alan O'Day, who has said he was directly inspired by the Beatles' earlier song Lady Madonna, while developing its unusual, story-driven concept about a lonely girl living inside her own imagined radio world. Performed by Australian singer Helen Reddy, the song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in December 1974, becoming her third and final chart-topping single in the United States. O'Day originally offered the song to Cher, who had previously recorded one of his earlier compositions, but she declined to record it, leaving the song available for Reddy instead. The song's deliberately ambiguous, surreal lyrics sparked considerable listener debate at the time about exactly what happens to the story's mysterious neighbor character, a mystery O'Day has said he never intended to be as confusing as audiences found it. Despite reaching number 1 and becoming one of the most talked-about story songs of the mid-1970s, the recording has largely faded from mainstream radio rotation in the decades since. It remains a genuinely strange, memorable piece of chart history for listeners who happened to catch it during its original run at the very end of 1974. O'Day would go on to have his own hit as a performer a few years later with Undercover Angel, making him one of the rare songwriters of that era to score a number 1 hit, both as a writer for another artist and later as a performer of his own material.
Angie Baby, you're special.
Number 4. Indian Reservation by Paul Revere and the Raiders.
So proud to live.
Released in early 1971, this song was written years earlier by songwriter John D. Loudermilk and had already been recorded twice before, first by Marvin Rainwater in 1959 under a different title, and later by British singer Don Farden in 1968, before Paul Revere and the Raiders version finally turned it into a massive nationwide hit. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that July, becoming the only chart-topping single of the band's long career, despite dozens of earlier singles released throughout the 1960s. Loudermilk told a colorful, widely repeated story about being taken captive by a group of Cherokee men and writing the song as part of a promise to secure his release, though the tale is generally regarded by music historians as a tall story rather than a literal account of events. The recording was produced largely by the band's lead vocalist Mark Lindsay, using top Los Angeles session musicians, commonly known as the Wrecking Crew, giving the track a polished, radio-ready sound. Despite becoming the best-selling single Columbia Records had released up to that point, the song has largely disappeared from mainstream oldies radio in recent decades. It remains a genuinely significant but now rarely heard piece of chart history for the band once known primarily for their colonial-style stage costumes. The band had actually already dropped Paul Revere and from their official name by the time this single was released, performing simply as The Raiders during this particular chart run, even though most listeners in later retrospectives continued referring to them by their more familiar original name.
So proud to live.
Number 3. Brand New Key by Melanie.
I got a brand new pair of roller skates. You got a brand.
Released in October 1971, this song was written and performed by singer-songwriter Melanie Safka, appearing on her album Gather Me, and quickly becoming known informally as the roller skate song. Because of its playful, repeated chorus, it reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in December of that year, becoming Melanie's biggest commercial success and one of the best-selling singles of the entire decade, with reported sales exceeding 3 million copies. The song's lighthearted, childlike delivery masked lyrics that many listeners and critics interpreted as containing subtle sexual innuendo, an interpretation Melanie herself neither confirmed nor denied in interviews at the time. Some radio stations reportedly grew uncomfortable with the song's underlying suggestiveness once that interpretation became widely discussed, even as its catchy sing-along melody kept it in heavy rotation elsewhere. Melanie had already built a reputation as a serious folk artist, having performed at the original Woodstock Festival 2 years earlier, making this playful, novelty-adjacent hit something of a surprising departure from her earlier material. Despite its massive original success, the song rarely appears on oldies radio playlists today, fondly remembered mainly by listeners who were around for its brief but enormous run at the top of the charts. Melanie has said in later interviews that she came to have somewhat mixed feelings about the song over the years, appreciating its commercial success while sometimes feeling it overshadowed the more serious personal material that made up the bulk of her broader songwriting catalog.
I got a brand new pair of roller skates. You got a brand new.
Number 2. Signs by five-man electrical band.
Sign, sign, everywhere a sign.
Written by the Canadian group's lead singer, Les Emerson. After a road trip along Route 66 during which he grew frustrated by billboards obscuring the natural scenery, this song was originally released in 1970 as a B-side before being reissued as the A-side the following year. Once radio disc jockeys began favoring it over the originally intended single, Signs climbed to #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the late summer of 1971, becoming the band's only major hit in the United States. The song's pointed, countercultural lyrics about arbitrary rules and authority resonated strongly with the era's younger listeners, giving the track a lasting reputation as a genuine anthem of early 1970s youth frustration. Formed originally as the Staccatos before changing their name, the band from Ottawa, Ontario had built a solid following in Canada for years before this single finally broke through internationally. Despite the song's massive original success, five-man electrical band struggled to replicate that level of impact afterward, and the group largely faded from American radio within just a few years. The song experienced a notable resurgence in 1990 through a cover version by the rock band Tesla, introducing it to a new generation who often had no idea the original had come from an entirely different band 2 decades earlier. Emerson continued performing Signs regularly at live shows throughout the rest of his career, and it remained closely tied to his public identity right up until his death in December 2021, still widely regarded as one of the defining protest-adjacent anthems of its era.
Sign, sign, everywhere a sign.
Number 1. 96 Tears By and the Mysterians.
96 tears.
Released in August 1966, this song was written by lead singer Rudy Martinez, known publicly only as Question Mark, years earlier in 1962, and recorded by the band in a small basement studio in Bay City, Michigan. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1966, becoming one of the most influential garage rock recordings of the entire decade, and later earning recognition as an early precursor to punk rock. Built around a simple, hypnotic 2-chord organ riff played on a Vox Continental keyboard, the song's stripped-down structure made it easy for countless amateur garage bands across the country to learn and perform themselves. Martinez cultivated a deliberately mysterious public persona throughout his career, frequently giving reporters conflicting, fantastical stories about his origins rather than straightforward biographical details. Despite topping the charts and selling well over 1 million copies, the band never returned to that level of commercial success, quickly becoming remembered primarily as one-hit wonders, despite additional chart entries later that same year. The song remains a touchstone for garage rock historians and musicians, even though casual radio listeners today rarely encounter it outside of dedicated 1960s programming blocks. Rolling Stone magazine later ranked it among the greatest songs of all time in one of its influential critics polls, a level of lasting critical respect that few other one-hit wonders from that same chart-topping era ever managed to achieve. The band's original lineup has occasionally reunited for live performances in the decades since, still drawing enthusiastic crowds, eager to hear the song performed, just as it originally sounded back in 1966. 15 songs, each one a genuine hit in its own moment, and each one now mostly forgotten by anyone who wasn't actually there to hear it the first time around on the radio. If you remembered even a handful of these, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into music history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.